We now call this meeting to order. If you could please pay attention to Councilwoman Nager for the introduction of the invocation, to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am pleased to introduce to everyone tonight Pastor Champagne Lloyd. She is currently the director of the Topeka Rescue Mission's Servants in Training Program and currently serves Topeka as a precinct chair of Precinct 91, Ward 5, and as one of the City of Topeka Human Relations Commissioners. She is a Christ the Victor pastor, an associate minister at Antioch Baptist Church, and a Topeka Police Department chaplain. She's an advocate for marginalized and vulnerable citizens, and her greatest accomplishments are her 4 adult children, 9 grandchildren, and being God's daughter. And amongst all of those things, she has joined us tonight to lead our invocation. Pastor Lloyd.
Good evening, Council. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, I ask that you first accept our praise and thanks. Thank you for the opportunity to serve. I ask now that you give wisdom to each and every council member. I ask that you allow them the knowledge that the decisions made today affect generations to come. And I ask that you give them the strength to make the decisions that help the whole and not an isolated group. I ask that you give them strength as they go about this hard task of leading this community in these trying times. I ask that you bless them with the remembrance of the passion and fervor that ignited in them to make them want to become a public servant. I ask that you provide all the unity that is needed, and I ask that we are able to use our differences as a strength to unifiedly drive Topeka forward in the way that it should go. Now I ask your blessings upon them and this city. In your Son, my Savior, Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. All right, we now proceed with the roll call.
Mayor De La Isla.
Here.
Council members Hiller.
Here.
Valdivia Acala.
Here.
Ortiz.
Here.
Emerson.
Here.
Padilla.
Here.
Nager.
Here.
Dobler.
Here.
Duncan.
Here.
And Lesser.
Here.
We now move on to the consent agenda, if the clerk would read.
A are minutes of the regular meeting of April 21, 2020, and the special meeting of April 27, 2020. And there is a list of open after midnight applications that I emailed to the governing body, and staff is recommending approval.
What is the pleasure of the body?
Move to approve.
We have a motion for approval by Councilman Padilla.
Second.
We have a second by Councilwoman Hiller. Comments or questions on the consent agenda? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla.
Yes.
Council members Hiller.
Yes.
Valdivia Acala.
Yes.
Ortiz.
Yes.
Emerson.
Yes.
Padilla.
Yes.
Nager.
Yes.
Dobler.
Yes.
Duncan.
Yes.
And Lester.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
We now move on into the action items. Action item A, if the clerk would read.
A is approval of a real estate purchase agreement between BRB Contractors Incorporated and the City of Topeka in the amount of $800 for the purchase of a parcel of land located on Northwest West Street.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we're looking at making a decision whether to authorize the purchase of some property for us to allow the construction of a stormwater facility to provide for collection and treatment of stormwater runoff in an area to help reduce localized flooding. The cost of the purchase of the land is about $800, and we recommend approval.
Any questions at this point in time for staff?
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
I just want to say you guys are a bit choppy tonight. I am really having to drill in to listen. I'm not sure what the issue might be. I'm sorry. I just wanted to let you know.
Thank you.
Additional comments or questions? Is this better, Councilwoman? When I spoke directly into the microphone, did that help? Okay, so at this point in time, we have the item. Do we have any questions for staff with regards to the first item? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of the body?
Move approval.
We have a motion for approval by Councilman Dobler. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Councilwoman Nager. Additional comments or questions on this item? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Alcala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. At this point, we move on to item B in the agenda, if the clerk would read.
B is acceptance of land dedications in the final plat for Greenhill Point subdivision located along the west side of Northwest Green Hills Road, lying between Northwest 48th Street and Northwest 50th Street, all being within unincorporated Shawnee County, Kansas, and contained in the city's 3-mile extraterritorial jurisdiction.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, Bill Finder will present to us a summary of the information concerning this plat approval. Bill, if you come forward.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Good evening, Your Honor, and City Council members. Good to see you. As mentioned, what you have tonight is a kind of a little bit of a rare item for you. It's a major plat. It's made a little bit even more rare by being outside the city limits. Major plats are anything that has 5 or more than 5 lots created, or there's a street dedicated. So you don't get to see these too often. Most of our plats are done administratively. But when it rises to this level, it comes before the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission is actually the one by state statute that approves or denies the plat. If they approve it, then it comes to you for acceptance of the dedications of right-of-way and easements. So that's really what the action is tonight. The background, the proposal is there's a 57-acre tract at the southwest corner of Northwest Green Hills and Northwest 50th Street. It is in our 3-mile extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ, which is the city's area for subdivision authority. So any new subdivisions that, in this area that are proposed have to be approved by the city. Okay, so this area is about 2 miles outside the city limits in our urban growth area, which makes it a pretty very low priority for what we would consider urban development and urban growth. However, it is in an area where there is a sanitary sewer service area for the Half-Day Creek Interceptor. This was put in about in the 1990s by, I think, funded by the county. It is currently maintained by the city. So anything that connects onto this is maintained by the city. All the sewer flow goes to our North Topeka treatment plant. So just that's how we're involved from a utility standpoint. The proposal has 18 lots for single-family development. 16 of those lots are only on 20% of the land. And I'm just gonna, okay. Sorry about that. You can see it a little bit better here, the configuration of the plat. Like I said, 16 of the lots are on 20% of the land. The remaining 80% of the land is consists of the 2 other lots that are 20-plus acres or more per lot. This clustering is what is recommended in our land use and growth management plan. The clustering makes it consistent with our plan, particularly when there are properties outside the city that cannot be annexed and that are on our utilities. The whole reason for this is it really balances the needs of accommodating development with current investment in that sewer facility that is up there, as well as not undermining or jeopardizing future urban growth down the road, or with a redirection, if you will, into our high priority areas. The city is our highest priority for future growth. And if we didn't have these rules in place, this particular site, you might see on sewer another 100, 150 lots. So I think this kind of gives you some idea that we're trying to balance the needs of wherever there is a sanitary sewer facility, preserve for future growth, and still accommodate our top priority for growth in the city. Planning Commission staff both found that it is consistent with our comprehensive plan. Planning Commission did approve the plat 7-1, so tonight we would just recommend that you accept the dedications of the right-of-way and easements. I'll stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Fyander? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, because this is new for me, when you say that we are maintaining the sewer, does that mean that we are being paid, that the sewer bill comes to us?
Councilwoman Hiller, I believe that is exactly how it works. So there is a connection fee, and then there's also the higher utility rate for customers outside the city, and that's what we get for. They are paid.
And so related to that then, if I may, that
Yes, ma'am.
they are not on city water.
Correct. They are on rural water.
And you mentioned that they are too far away. Often when we have had these conversations, there's a consent to annex that's involved. Not in this case?
I'm sorry, I avoided that condition. There is a consent to annex. There always will be a consent to annex, particularly when it's our utilities that they are connecting to. That is a requirement.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Additional questions from the members that are on Zoom? Seeing no questions, Councilman Padilla?
I don't know if it's appropriate. Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if this is appropriate or not. I'm just wondering, Mr. Fryer, do you have any idea about the kind of or the type of residences that will be coming into that area? I mean, maybe the price range or anything like that, or density?
Councilman Padilla, the construction company, the owner, developer, Mike Trepay Construction, indicated these are not going to be entry-level homes, but they're not going to be upper end either. So something, I think, a ranch style. He did not give us a price point that they're looking at doing, but it would be somewhere in the middle of a new home construction market target. And they could be on slab, it could have basement, he would do both. I know that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Lesser? We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second? We have a second by Councilman Padilla. Do we have any additional comments or questions for staff?
I do have a comment, please.
Yes, sir. Councilman Dobler.
I'm not opposed to this development, and I'll vote in favor of it, but the consent to annex is basically worthless because it's in a rural water district, and the city of Topeka has a difficult time, any city has a difficult time annexing property that's served by a rural water district. Just a point of information, I guess.
Thank you so much, Councilman Dobler. Additional comments or questions? Councilwoman Ortiz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could ask Neil a question, then why would we consider annexing this?
Councilman
No,
Vogler?
it's always it's required if you hook up to city utilities. This area was sewered years and years ago, probably 25 years ago, with a big interceptor sewer through that area that ties into the city of Topeka in anticipation of city growth in that direction. You know, why those decisions were made are anyone's guess at this point. But the reality is, based on federal law, it is almost impossible for a municipality to annex property that's in a rural water district. So having a consent to annex is pretty much worthless in this case.
Thank you.
Additional comments or questions? All right, seeing none at this point in time, we proceed by the vote.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Council Members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Aquila,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. At this point in time, we move on to item C, if the clerk would read.
C is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout amending City of Topeka Code Section 215-020 concerning meetings of the governing body.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, this item is coming back to us after some discussion at Finance and Policy and Finance, although they didn't get to meet again to confirm things. This all stemmed from the idea that we wanted to pursue the opportunity of having meetings at separate locations. Obviously, seems like eons ago that we looked at that idea, but nonetheless, they did do a thorough review, made some revisions to what they were looking at, and I guess I would turn it over to the chair, Councilman Lesser, to go through what they settled on, and that's what proposed for tonight.
Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. I also ask any of the committee members to hop in anytime they would like to jump in, but that is correct. We have not met since our initial meeting. What I would like to do is, we feel that we have a strong, acceptable change for the governing body. The one thing that I think we would like to do possibly is meet one more time to finalize a few changes in that. One thing in regards to the off-site meeting portion of it, I thought my committee members came up with some good ideas, and we have a good meat and potatoes. But since the Corona situation, we'd like to meet one more time, finalize everything, and we are still, my plan is to hopefully still move forward. However, in regards to the off-site meeting, we would like to meet one more time to get that put so it was policy, or present for it to be policy. However, we would also want to make the change that there is no start date of when we're going to do that, and there will be no expenditures made. The estimate we had was around $12,000 in additional cost to do that. I didn't feel that it was prudent to do that at this point in time. I see this as a want, not a need. And so we'd like to meet one more time, get the policy approved, or finalize that, so we can bring it to you guys for approval, get it ready to roll, and then also have a little language in there that says that it doesn't have an implementation time period yet, and that no funds will be spent on the project until such time as ordered by the council.
Anybody who has questions for Chair Lesser? Councilwoman Ortiz.
I would second that.
Well, at this point in time, there is no motion. It's just accepting the report from the body. So that seems like a sign of affirmation for you to continue to have your next meeting. Additional comments from the body? Councilwoman Hiller?
I just have a question. I read these when they were on the preliminary agenda and kind of locked in that you were planning to ask them to go back to committee, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it, nor did I get hold of you. If we do have some comments, would you like us to just forward them directly to the committee?
You would send those to Hannah. Hannah will take care of those for you. Dr. Nager will take care of those.
Oh, yes, I will field all of those.
That's fine, yeah, you can send that.
Okay, thank you.
I think any three of us, the only person, because of the not being able to meet, that I have not had the opportunity to share with is Dr. Nager. So I guess I would ask it, make sure that Dr. Nager is in agreement with that plan.
I am completely in agreement, Chair.
Thank you. So yeah, I would say address any of the three of us would be fine.
Okay, thank you.
10-4.
Councilman Duncan.
And I'll just add, I mean, Mike summed it up perfectly. I mean, part of it was there's a fiscal note, and this obviously is not the time to put anything, but we did the work, so we feel like it's silly not to, but when we say we're going to meet again, I think we're not in a hurry. Like, we're not talking like the next month. It could be the end of the year before you see this, just to clarify, but at least we get that moving, and, you know.
It's going to roll up in 90
We didn't
days.
want to put, I know, or, you know.
Additional comments or questions before we accept the report? At this point in time, it seems that the council is accepting the report. We move on to the next item, which is item D, if the clerk would read.
D is amending governing body rule 3.1 concerning regular governing body meetings.
City Manager?
I think, as Councilman Lesser mentioned, this would apply, the decision would apply to this item as well. This was part of it, but really we're looking at two different changes in the code in order to be able to do this, and this would accomplish that, so the further review would apply to this as well.
Okay, everybody okay with that? Making sure that we just take this as part of the initial report? All right, so we accept the report and we add this to the report as well. We move on to item E, if the clerk would read.
E is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout temporarily suspending certain governing body rules and procedures in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, we have on the agenda the resolution to be able to extend continuing to have the meetings as we have for remote. Not really sure how much longer we would need this and how different members would feel about continuing to come, as we have a mixture tonight, that we would look at the possibility of, at this point, extending it to June 3rd. June 3rd would allow us to meet the rest of May and the first meeting in June, and at that time we would put it back on the agenda for a determination again as to whether to extend it. That way we continue to allow people in this current state to be able to decide which they feel most comfortable with.
And I think that is extremely judicious, just because of the fact that we are able to be out right now to do our job. It does not mean that social distancing and precautions are to be relaxed. Actually, all the contrary. I think that it would be a good idea for us to continue with these measures. And I think that based on the incidence of infection and things that are happening in our community, things can change at any point in time. So I would personally support it, but I do want to open it up for the body to see if there's any questions with regard to this item. Councilman Duncan.
So I have I guess a question / clarification in regards to public comment. Right now, I know we're receiving public comment. I read it, I get it. It's currently being included in the minutes, but those minutes aren't posted correct until we approve them as a body.
That's accurate, yes.
Is there a way we could at least, since we know we're going to have 3, maybe 4, and there's a delay, we could at least put public comments online prior to that approval, just so the people who submit them know that they get out in the world in a more timely manner?
I think that's very reasonable. We can do that.
That would be my request.
Councilwoman Heller.
Just a question. Thank you for this, and thanks for the sections that sort of say, be it further resolved, and explain how we might function. I remember when we passed the first one, we had some questions about committee meetings, and I see that we're talking about, we canceled them all in April, so it wasn't a deal, but now we're talking about getting them going again. We're exempting ourselves from the television coverage. Is that correct? So what is the idea for what will happen with committee meetings
Well,
under this?
my position would be is that since there are only 3 members of a committee and typically anywhere from 2 to 3 staff, if things progress as we think and we move into phase 2 starting May 18th, we would be allowed to have 30 individuals as long as you could social distance. And so I think that either in conference room A at Holiday Building or potentially at LEC, we could set up a room in a way to allow an in-person committee meeting if needed. And so I would look at that would be desired. If you would like to go to remote, and there's some provisions that need to be modified in the code, and the city attorney could prepare those and we could bring those at the next meeting.
This update, governing body has a suspension of Rule 8.6, quorum for committee meetings. That's been added in so that you can have a remote meeting for committees if you wish.
Okay.
I did not remember that. Thank you.
So that solves
Right.
that.
So you could either obviously have them in person, or you could have the chairperson there and 2 people by Zoom, but you can do remote meetings through this new suspension through June 3rd.
And just to clarify, because I've got a few meetings coming up even before the 18th, I think, it would be optional. We still wouldn't be inviting the public during this whole month. So it would be, the committees actually could meet live
Yes.
if they chose, as long as there was distancing and a minimum number of staff.
Correct. Just kind of like this.
Okay. Or do we have the capacity? Is there extra expense if it's Zoom?
No, I believe it's the same as just the login that you get.
Once we
You click
figured it
on
out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
So Liz would probably send it out much the same as how she does now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of the body?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion for approval by Councilman Padilla, second by Councilwoman Nager. Any questions or comments to add to this discussion? Seeing none, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Councilmembers Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Acala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. We move on to item F, if the clerk would read.
F is a resolution introduced by City Manager Brent Trout establishing the city's 2021 budget priorities.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. Sorry about that. As we look forward to tonight, discussing our budget priorities, what we're looking at is obviously some challenges that we may experience as we go into 2021. So these priorities have been carried forward for for a number of years, and with minor adjustments to them. And per se, with regards to the priorities, I don't think I have anything that I would recommend. However, I do have some questions that I would like to ask the governing body. I guess, first of all, if they have questions with the priorities, we could address that. But then I have some other important questions that I'd like to ask the governing body with regards to how we move forward as we enter into the 2021 budget, because I think that they need to be asked in order to help guide us to move along a little easier.
Okay.
So I guess, first of all, I would ask if there's any changes that others would want to make related to the priorities that are in the budget, and we could address that.
Any changes to the city budget priorities that anybody would like to bring up for the city manager for discussion? Councilwoman Hiller.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple, but I would just as soon, I am really glad that you said what you did, because I read through them and I compared them to the ones we were presented in February, and I thought, okay, this is fine, and yes, there's a couple of small questions or words I might tweak, but it seemed like we had a lot bigger direction and decisions to make for you than those specific things. And so I would have a couple, but I would certainly defer to these bigger conversations first, if we decide to proceed with this one.
There seems to be nobody else. Councilwoman Hiller, if you would like to, City Manager?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So as I looked at the budget, and we've had discussions about talking about public safety and that being an important priority for us, we've looked at the need that we had in our budget of fulfilling vacancies that we have both in the police and fire department. We currently carry about 13 vacancies this year in the 2020 budget that we started the year knowing we would have 13 vacancies at the end of the year in order to help to balance the budget. The same is about 10 in the fire department. When I looked at initially, when we had a going economy, we had not had a increase to the levy for 6 to 7 years now, that it was time that if we really wanted to put our priority forward of looking at the emergency services personnel, that we should look at filling that gap and filling all of those positions. So as we did that, we ended up looking at it as being right in the neighborhood of about a $3 million gap, looking at regular increases plus filling all of those positions. If you do what we look at as a rule of thumb of about $1.1 million per mill increase, we would need to raise our levy by 3 mills. As I look at it and I look around knowing where we're at right now, I think that's a very difficult discussion for us to have and consider. Now, so really that's kind of the basis of, first of all, is whether or not we want to look at different options. Or do we want to pursue with that? I know the priority is definitely public safety, and we have those positions that have been vacant, and it would be nice to have them filled. But as we look at how we craft a budget, that's a difficult thing to do. Every one of those positions that we would look at filling, if we didn't have a levy increase, would also require us to eliminate 23 positions in some other department. And so it's quite a quandary for us as we look at preparing a budget. We can also look at, as other communities have done, potentially a sales tax that would raise specifically for emergency responder personnel, police, fire, to help with that, or not. And I guess just trying to look at options as to how we want to proceed with that. Now, to be fair, you may not be able to give me that answer specifically tonight. That's a big question. We know, though, that in order to meet that gap of what we have for the number of personnel that we have been carrying vacancies for, it's a big lift. And so we need to weigh what's going to be the effect as we come through this COVID economy recovery on our businesses and our own residents. And so it's obviously a difficult decision. But I wanted to see what kind of input you could provide me tonight, because as we move forward with this, we don't really want to make a budget twice. We'd like to do it once and not have to go backwards with regards to it. Because in order to fill all those positions, we would need to look at a levy increase or some other revenue source to be able to do so. Some quick numbers. We have on the books 299 sworn police officer positions. We currently have 261 assigned, if you include the recruits that we have. So we have a bit of a gap there. With firefighters, we have 243 that are currently positions that we have, and 230 of them are, we actually have 230 firefighters if you include the 7 recruits that are currently in the academy. So we have a gap that we've been carrying for a while, and that's something that we've talked about internally as something to be considering. So that helps with many things when it comes to manning, but we also have to be realistic. So that's what I'm presenting, and that's probably my first question, and I would appreciate any feedback that you could give me now and as we move forward.
Councilman Duncan.
So one number you put out, I just want to clarify. You said if we eliminated 23 other positions or went unfilled, that's a break even if we filled one. I mean, that's your rough. I know it depends on the position. And the
it's a rough estimate. Not every position probably quite reaches to what a new police officer or firefighter pays, but depending on the positions that you would have to look at, I mean, it's easily a 1-for-1, maybe more, in order to actually get to that number.
Do we have anywhere a chart, whether it's the last 10 years or even 20 years, of number of city positions? I mean, basically a quick overview. 20 years ago, we had this many, and each year we had this many employees, and then broken down by departments, what that chart would look like?
I don't have it with me.
I didn't know if you had it.
I think it exists, and if not, we could surely generate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that'd be helpful for some of us to also see what that's looked like,
Yeah.
whether it's been a wave or whether
Right.
we've had a steady increase or decrease, or give us
And I
some
think-
context.
Right, and that plays hand in hand with the discussions that we had last Friday relative to our budget and what we're looking at with regards to being lean and understanding where we've come from back in 2009, when there were a number of reductions in staffing to where we're at today. I know that question was asked, and so it would make sense that we would be able to provide, we can provide that to you.
Additional questions for city manager or comments? Councilman Dobler?
I believe Councilwoman Valdivia was just ahead of me.
Oh, sorry, that's the first hand I saw, so Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Okay, so I'm not sure I heard this right, because again, y'all are breaking up, but you're saying right now, we have 299 on TPD. No, we should have 299 on TPD, but we currently have 261 filled, correct?
Correct.
And then should have 243 with firefighters, and we currently have 230.
Correct.
So if I'm hearing you right, and I hope I heard this right, you're talking about the vacancies, using that, not filling those vacancies to cover the gap, the budget gap we're looking at.
Yes, we established that a number of positions would not be filled in 2020 in order to balance our budget. And so that's what we established.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I heard that. Thank you, Brent.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilman Dobler, to be followed by Councilman Padilla.
Mayor, Manager, can you talk a little bit about the sales tax? So first of all, I understand the half-cent fix our street, so you can leave that one out. But as far as the general fund sales tax, what is the percent that comes to the city? And is any of that dedicated to police and or fire at this point in time?
It's 6.5. One. Oh, yeah, it's a 1 cent sales tax, yes. So 1 cent comes in from all of the community, and then it's added in, that's part of the general fund, as far as general fund.
Okay, none of that's specific to public safety, is that correct?
Yes, correct. I'm sorry, I didn't finish the statement. Yes, correct. It's not specifically tied, it's just part of the money, that revenues that we have that go into the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Padilla?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. City Manager, I'll draw your attention to number 2 of our priorities that we're looking at right now. And I've been concerned about this one for a while. The first bullet point there is continue an active and strenuous recruitment of public police officers and firefighters and maintain an optimal level of officers and firefighters. It's just confusing to me that we would be active and strenuous in recruitment, but not fill the positions. I mean, we can get people here, and we've been successful in doing that, and maybe give them even, what is that, an offer of employment, but then not be able to follow through with that, so that we lose those people, we have to start back all over again. I just think that if we're going to make that a priority, then we have to fund that priority. And I think all of us have agreed, and I think the public makes it clear that one of the last things that they want to cut back on is public safety. And so your ideas about maybe using sales tax or some other reductions in staffing, we kind of brought that up the last time. I know I made that comment that I think that that's important for us to look at, and I know you're doing a good job at digging down into this, but it gets ugly after a while, I know, because when you start talking about funding for this group, in order to do it, we may have to reduce the numbers of staffing at this group. That's why I made the recommendation that I'd like to see us continue to be strenuous in our recruitment and active, but I want us to be able to put them on the street, because both with firefighters and police, it's not like you hire them 1 week and they're on duty the next weekend. They have a long process to go through. And so that gap leaves the city, in my estimation, a bit undermanned. And so we're constantly looking at overtime and extra hours, and I don't know that that's a win-win when you start to put pencil to paper on the money. If you're paying overtime, it'd be better just to have a couple extra officers or firefighters so they could do the job. And again, I think anything that you can come up with, I'm open-minded to ideas, suggestions from this body or anyone about how we can meet that level and fund what we are authorized to have, and look again at those staffing measures that come from the top down rather than the bottom up. I'm just saying that. I know that you made the comment that maybe some of those that you would consider that you would eliminate might be around that same area as a police officer or firefighter. But I don't know that that's where I want to see us looking at. Instead of a 1-for-1, maybe 1 for 2 or 3. So that's why I'm saying top down and give that a very strong look. Thank you.
Thank you.
City Manager, I'm gonna do the awkward question, because I know that you asked specifically for us to give you direction with regards to if we will consider a tax increase. So my question to you is, if you are talking about proposing to the body as one of the alternatives for us to consider such a thing, what are you more or less estimating with your financial modeling that we would need to look at? And what would that equate to?
Sure. As we look at the police officer positions, it's, and I'd ask Jessica to chime in if we have specific numbers, but I think we're in the 65,000 range for a police officer, starting with salary and benefits in that neighborhood. And I think it's very close and similar to each firefighter. And so that is substantial amount of money. Then we have, the normal raises that occur with each of those positions, and if we're full staff, that'll be higher as well. And with other increases in salary that are already scheduled for individuals. That's why I say it's in the $2.5 to $3 million is what we talk about as far as our needs might be to fully staff and give the projected raises for each of those positions.
So that's more or less 3 mils, 3.5 mils.
Right, 3 mils. Now, if you went to a sales tax measure, we know that a half-cent sales tax generates between 14 and 15 million on an average year. So if we did a quarter, that would be 7 million. We may not need to do a quarter. Maybe it's 0.1 more. And Doug sent me a note reminding me that our combined levy for our county is 9.15. So, when we looked at the last sales tax for roads, we looked at wanting to stay. We considered an extra quarter cent at that time, but decided that we wanted to stay further away from that 10% number on taxes, because that is a psychological barrier that oftentimes hits individuals when they're considering where to make their purchases. And so for us, adding a 0.1 or a 0.2 might be an option if we knew exactly what we wanted to use it to fund, and that might be a direction to go versus doing the mill. And I think the other thing that I look at as well is that oftentimes individuals that are in our city are potentially utilizing our police force and our fire department when they're here in town. And so the idea of a sales tax charge to individuals as they're making purchases in our community also has some validity, as did when we considered that for our road sales tax, as that they are using our roads. So there is some similarity with regards to the utilization against all as a sales tax.
Thank you. Councilman Duncan.
I sort of asked this last week, and I guess part of what I struggle with this is one size does not fit all for our departments across the way. So when we say things, and not saying we're saying, but if, you can't just say, in my opinion, 3% cut or 10% cut and everybody figure it out. I'm not sure that's always effective. I guess what I still would like to see, I mean, our department heads aren't just pretty faces, they're all fairly smart people, and so I think I would like to see them brought to the table and asked, okay, you take a look at, and I know they do this on a regular basis, so,
Yes,
but we're here, this is what we know is gonna be a struggle for this rest of this year and the next budget cycle. I think I would like to hear from them, okay, my department can honestly do this, and we've talked about some of those things. What departments are outsourcing things that can either be brought in-house, or it's time to completely outsource them, and what is the impact to the staff on that? If they had to do a staff restructuring, what would that look like from their perspective? I mean, we have a fire department that's looking at things like expanded EMS services. If we're close to that, what is the revenue stream of that over the next 3 to 5 years, if there is one? How do they project that? I mean, I think if they were allowed to do some of those things, I think that would help us, give us a better perspective, instead of us going into those departments and saying, okay, you've given us no option except cut 5%. And some places are going to say, I've been doing that for the last 5 years consistently, and whereas some department may come to us and say, I found a way to trim 12%, look at me, or whatever that is. And so now part of that's wishful thinking, and here's hoping, but I would like to let those department heads have input into this process with all the flexibility in their toolbox, and then we can sort of sift through some of that. So it's just...
Well, it's very ironic that you bring that up. Today I had a discussion with the finance officer, and that, I have put on and plan to put on the agenda to discuss our 2020 budget reductions. The finance officer, Jessica's already been working with each department to see what each department can bring to the table, and has been having those conversations all along. But already what my intent is that on the May 19th meeting, each department director would go through those, make a presentation related to items that they're looking at within their department, and prepare that information and present that information so that we can have a discussion about the items that they're able to identify.
Councilwoman Heller?
Thank you, Mayor. Let me piggyback right on that. I sat down and spread out my notes on the dining room table to try and prepare for this meeting, because we really have been talking for about three different but very related things. One is 2020, what are we going to do? One is the CIP for 2021 and forward, and the other is what's the operating budget in 2021 and going to look like, which drives back into these budget priorities. I tried to distill out what I heard from everyone in the council in the discussions last time about the 2020 budget, and it would provide a different way of asking the question than, as Councilman Duncan talks about, just the figure out how to cut 3% or figure out how to cut 5%. What I heard the council saying is, let's challenge ourselves, staff, management, and the council, about, I made it just 3 things. One of them has a little group in it. But first, what is essential? What are we doing that is essential versus something that we wanted to? That's the wants and needs thing. So just evaluating what is essential. So not who, but what. What are we doing? And the second, what could be more efficient? Might still do that task, but is there a way to do it more efficiently? And the third was, where could grants or citizen responsibility or smarter financing save money, save tax money? Again, you could separate those, but I kind of grouped them together. I think when you ask that question, you can even go back to police and fire. Are there activities, marketing, for instance, or layers of bureaucracy to make certain decisions that, even looking internally at the really popular, if you want to say it, departments, how many people go out on a fire truck? How many people go out on a utility truck? Is there a way that or a forestry truck? If private business sends one person out on a truck and they do all the work themselves and come back, do we need 4? You know, those sorts of things that come up in bits and pieces. So I would suggest that maybe approach, that's what I heard last time. It was what's essential, what could be more efficient, and where could there be other money, or could we spend less money in doing that? So with that in mind, what I was looking at for the budget priorities were along the lines of what you're saying. One, I think we have to come to terms and give you some direction about whether we want to see the 2021 budget come in without a tax increase or not. That is a huge amount of direction that these priorities don't really cover. Often we talk about it, but we sort of dance around it and don't give you specific direction. And as part of that, do we want you to figure out, or to us mutually to figure out how we can do that and also not deplete reserves? So I think we need to give that direction. Related to that, we have on deck for this year doing fire planning, clear direction about whether this body wants to see whatever that new plan is come in at a budget authority comparable to what it has today versus a change. We'd give very clear direction to you and to that team that's going to work on it. Third, are we spinning off the zoo or not? We've talked about it enough. I'm thinking maybe we could make a decision, but that makes a big difference in both the capital budget and the operating budget, especially at a time like right now, but at any time. And fourth, are we planning to direct that the capital budget be set within the current policy limits? And if so, because right now it goes over those limits in years 4 and 5 as proposed. And we also have to figure out Pole Quincy. So if we are determined that it stay within that, within our adopted cap, would that include Pole Quincy Viaduct, or would Pole Quincy be extra? I think those are the big things we need to really give direction on.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, you actually stole the thunder on my points 3 and 4, which were that I still intend to have the Fire Service Committee. I think that, you know, I'm waiting to see whether the relaxed, we enter into phase 2 and then begin to look at providing the information out to those individuals that are on that committee in order to be able to start that process. You know, initially, there's a lot of information that needs to be reviewed and presented, and we maybe can do that, you know, more easily through the Zoom method versus all getting together in June to start meeting, you know, in person with that committee. So that was point 3, and then point 4 was the zoo governance. One of the things that we found, interestingly enough, was that the Friends of the Zoo were able to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program this year, whereas the zoo itself could not because of their status. There were other things that potentially they could be considered for going forward because of their status versus it being a city zoo. And so I think that all things that we've been looking, this is one that we're further along with. Now, one thing to remember is right now within the current budget, the number that would go towards the zoo is the same, whether it's change in governance happens or not. And we've been doing that purposely because for the first year, it may be harder for them related to the revenue expectations that they can generate with their budgets and so forth. But that's an ongoing discussion, of course, with Friends of the Zoo as to how that happens. But there's some changes that happen in that, and so we wanted this first year to be looking at the same number. Now, in future years, we looked at a different number, but initial number was the same. So it may be the right decision to still make, but it might be that we really aren't seeing the effects of that until future years.
Councilwoman Heller.
Well, but even along that line, they all balance one another. If we're looking at what our budget is and we're needing to trim up, let's say, then, you know, is the zoo, and everybody loves the zoo and the police and fire the best, so I get that. But is the zoo as important as fixing streets? Or as important as fire if we're having to make decisions?
Understood.
And even though it's tough, if we were debating whether there'd be subsidy and whether we would include any of the capital projects, that is so significant for us to decide. Maybe they would need to do without a tiger for a year or something as they retool and get off on their own. I don't know. These are difficult things for all of us to talk about, so those are just throwing out examples that we need to think about.
Okay. Additional, Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One thing that I have looked into that I would like to direct a question to Ms. Robertson is, I know that we've looked at in the past and it's ruled because of, and I'm going to make it real simplistic, but the fact of property taxes and whatnot, we do not have the ability to charge service calls for fire calls, for police calls, et cetera, et cetera. My understanding is because the courts have ruled that because you pay property taxes, that's included in that, and so on and so forth, correct?
Correct.
I would like you, though, however, to look into the possibility of one of the things that the city of Topeka as a capital city struggles with, that we are not any different than many capital cities, is the number of properties that we do not have on the tax rolls. Everything from the Association of Chiropractors, not picking on the Association of Widgets to whatever, that locate their facilities here because of the proximity to the Capitol and the legislature and lobbying and so on and so forth. And then that also includes, a lot of other nonprofits as well that do not pay any property taxes to us, to the state, or to us, or to the county that we receive. They expect us to respond to their fires. They expect us to respond to crimes. They utilize our sewers. They utilize our water lines. They drive on our streets. I think I would like to at least look at if there are any options for a consideration of a very nominal based use tax or use fee, not a tax, a use fee, and see if there's any possibilities of that would be, like I said, very nominal. But if you do the math on it, I'm already was going to ask the partnership to do a pro forma for me of different levels of a nominal fee in relationship to what they would actually pay in property tax if they were not excluded. So if you could do that when you have, I know you have a million other things to do, but when you get the opportunity to do that, I would at least like to look at that. May go nowhere, but I've had many conversations, and I think there are lots of those that understand that there's no such thing, as my dad said, as a free lunch. So everyone kind of has to play their part. So thank you.
Councilman Duncan.
I would ditto that, although I hope all the chiropractors just email Councilman Lesser, not hold everybody when they send their emails, please. We get it. Do we have, and this just me not knowing, do we have any city sales tax exemptions, like just blanket? The state has hundreds of them. Do we have any city ones?
Thank you, Mayor. We actually looked into that back when we were studying the advancement of the sales tax for the roads. Could we look at not including on that tax the possibility of not taxing groceries and things like that? The research that we've done, legal did, is that we have to follow whatever the state prescribes related to exemptions and what's taxed and what's not. You're not able to separate your own with regards to a city as to what you might exempt.
Okay, so we don't have any additional exemptions out, I'm
No.
not talking about, we
No.
took one off, we
It-
don't have anything on top.
And
we're not allowed
it
to
makes
do that.
sense that we would want to match, it matches whatever the state has prescribed.
Additional questions or comments or guidance for city manager as we are looking at the budget? Councilwoman Hiller?
Thank you. I'll piggyback on, I'll have a whole list, but I'll piggyback on the fire issues, because I do think, once again, when we think about the experiences that we've had, or ask the staff to brainstorm how we could work smarter or whatever, sometimes it's cross-departmental, and the examples would be regarding police and fire. When we've got, and on my list, it was under greater citizen responsibility. And you've got a property owner, they're responsible to secure it. You know, and if we have to go and board it up, if they've already been noticed, maybe by code, that they should have kept it boarded, and that if there's a call, however we would be able to get the fee set up, we have to board it, you're gonna have to pay. We had a big fire in my district a couple of weeks ago. That property, I mean, it was like a 2-alarm fire when the old Governor's Mansion stables on 8th Street. That property's been written up by code for a long time. It was in such bad shape that you could walk in a hole in the back wall. So it was not whether something would happen, it was only when. And to me, that owner should be responsible for the fire expenses, and usually they're good about charging them for the demo. I don't know if there was any insurance on it, but I don't see why the taxpayers should have to eat the cost when an owner, even if they hadn't been noticed up by us, was derelict in their own duties.
That's sorry, Mayor. That is one of those things where just, you could have an owner that has done everything necessary, boarded it up, and it is secure. A person can still break in and do all of those things. So it becomes very difficult to be able to charge. You know, we charge them every time that we need to board up. We do. We charge them every time that it needs to be boarded up. And if it's multiple times, they get a charge each time. But to go after them for the cost of that fire, if they've done what they should, or it is boarded up, that's where we can't.
But they hadn't. And you know, I'm in that case, it was open.
Well,
And so,
when we know they're not secure
Yeah.
and they're vacant, code tells them they need to secure it. If they don't, then code secures it and charges them.
we can check on the details of that case, but
Well, in each case may be different, but I'm telling you what standard procedure
I understand.
is code knows they're open. They ask the owner, if they can find the owner, to board it, secure the building. If they don't, we do it in order to protect the community from that possibility, and we charge them.
On the code committee, we're apparently only collecting I'm chairing public health and safety, and we've asked, we're only collecting 50% of what we bill out for code. And so those kinds of things are, I think, ought to be red flags to all of us in terms of how do we either, if owners think they're just running a tab with us and it's a convenience, it is somehow to get that responsibility to them.
I understand that.
Whatever.
But the issue is we send them to collection agency for collection if they don't pay us, and we carry that and we go after them. So we do what we can. I mean, unfortunately, we have people that are not reputable that will try and get away from us related to that, and can assess to the taxes. So some of those things are done when they can be done.
We have, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wasn't eager to debate the whole thing all the way through. I do think those are the kinds of things that we could and should look into. That was really today.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Karen, thanks for bringing that up, because initially as you started talking about it, I thought, well, yeah, I mean, why wouldn't we want to pass on more of that responsibility to, an irresponsible landlord or homeowner or whatever the case may be? And then I thought, well, yeah, but what is the rate that we collect, right? When we do these fines, and you're saying 50%, it sure would be good if we could get something stronger on the books for collections. I mean, I can see both sides of it. I can see if we could strengthen up on, you know, our ability to collect without running ourselves, you know, more costs in that way. I definitely think it deserves further discussion down the road. Also, when it comes to, you know, saving some money with perhaps not doing some things with the zoo, you know, which you mentioned before, I definitely think that that is something that is worth looking into as well. And the other part with, you know, having some of these other property owners, or they have their buildings on certain properties, pay up for services that they are getting for free. I mean, I think, you know, that we can certainly consider this a time when everybody needs to jump on board to help, and I think that's a good suggestion as well. So thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think, comment and a question, kind of along Karen's line of thinking there is, I think what I would like to look at is evaluating the perfect scenario of what she's talking about. You know, not necessarily debating what it is and what that, but the perfect scenario. And we have those situations with code compliance, and we certainly don't want to, you know, the elderly, the people who don't have the funds, who we want to work with, who we want to talk to. But then we have that group over there that are business owners, that have a pro forma, that they make a decision what they're going to do and what they're not going to spend on. And then these are properties that are income producing for them. They're vehicles to produce income. And my question is, in the event of the collections and what have you, is when we have cars and we have people who don't pay their parking tickets. And there again, I want to really rephrase it. I'm talking about a lot of times the out-of-state business owner that owns these houses that he runs into the ground. We're not talking about the people who can't pay their bills, the elderly, et cetera, et cetera. But when we have the guy with the parking tickets and then he shows up downtown and he goes to leave and he's got a boot on his car and he can't go anywhere. There again, I go back to legal to a certain extent. What gives us, what stops us from that same opportunity for that businessman who has not done this? We find to show up, and we've put a bar on the entrances and the exits of that house. And until those fines are paid, until that thing's taken care of, you know, from this guy in Florida, Texas, wherever the hell he is, you know, they don't come off, no different than they don't on a car. There again, I understand there's homestead law versus a vehicle and stuff like that, but I don't care about those guys, you know. Pay your bill or, you know, stop the cash flow, you know. So.
You're exactly right, Councilmember Lesser. That's a very fine line. And I don't know if you'll recall, I think, yeah, that we had a padlock case not too long ago, but that's all tied to criminal activity, where we actually physically went in and we padlocked the house, and nobody could get in. But when we did that, it was very, very, very difficult. We had to detail every single thing out to the T. We worked very closely with TPD to make sure everything was just right, and we actually did padlock it. I think it was kind of near where Joe Ledbetter lives, maybe somewhere. Yeah. So, but
there again, I would be curious what the law is in regards to, you know, like I said, there's a boot on the car. You're not going anywhere till you pay your fees. I would be curious to see how that applies to real property, such as that, while at the same time being conscientious of the homeowner. But then I'm getting in the weeds here, but that goes into a whole other, where then those people have an action against him as well for not, you know. So I'd just be curious to see, what that is. There again, I'm talking about the perfect situation. There's not that many of them, but then those are the ones that usually owe the most,
So I think that I'm getting a little bit concerned. Not that I love the discussion that we're having, but I think that the whole impetus of the conversation, these are great strategies, but they're not helping the city manager with the priorities that he's asking us for. They are giving him some direction. I'm not saying that this is not budget discussion. It is absolutely budget discussion, but my concern is, I think that city manager is asking us for clear instruction with regards to what we want our priorities to be for the next year. All of those points are excellent and well taken. I don't want to say that anybody was out of order, because nobody was. Everybody was talking about the budget. But I think that we could have an open budget discussion if we proceed in this trail, and I want to make sure that we come back to the item, which is providing him the instruction of what are the things that we want him to focus on with regards to the priorities that we currently have and that we want to continue, and what is the instruction on how, as they're going to be building this budget now, what are the things that we want him to present to us as options? Councilman Lesser.
Go ahead.
Councilman
No,
Duncan.
you're fine.
Okay, well, and I'm not passing the buck here, I want to be clear, but it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. I think if I could see I am ready and willing, because I ran for this seat, to make tough decisions, and I will do it. But I'd rather do it in cooperation with our departments rather than with them screaming at me. That's not what I need you to do. So I think that's why it goes back to my first statement was, I would really like to see what some of the departments would like to bring to us for consideration from their perspective, if they have some ideas that we can work with that from flowing from those, as opposed to, again, us saying, well, we need you to absolutely cut this here and cut that there. I'm ready to do that, but I think that, so that's why I say I'm not trying to be ambivalent or pass the buck, but I think that would be helpful. And sort of to get us there, because I think what I would pass on to all the department heads listening is, I think and you're not proposing this today is, but I think we all agree that looking at a 3-4 mill levy increase coming off of a pandemic is not where we want to head if it's at all possible, but that means some tough decisions have to be made moving forward. And so that's my perspective is, I would like to see those ideas before I pass something down, and get some feedback there.
Councilman Lesser, then Councilman Dobler.
Go ahead. I'm all right.
Councilman Dobler.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I would agree. I do not believe 2021 is a year for any type of mill levy increase. We've got folks that are going to be hurting. They're going to have a tough time paying a lot of things, and that's not, that's going to be across our city. I'm not even sure 2022 is going to be the year for a mill levy increase. So it is time for some tough decisions. I agree with Councilman Duncan that it'd sure be a lot easier to have a collaborative discussion about what our priorities are, where consolidations can take place, where combined management can take place, a whole host of things. We talked about it Friday, so I won't repeat all of them, but outsourcing, privatization, everything has to be on the table right now. Doesn't mean we're going to do all of that, but we at least need to discuss it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. Councilman Lester.
Yeah, now I'm ready. So yeah, that's, and I understand your point with all due respect, but as Neil Councilman, we aren't going to be able to solve this by simply cutting. That's why, as a small business owner, I try to make money, so I look at these through lines of how can we generate income, what ways can we do that, as well as how can we cut different things. And that's, I guess, the only small area where I disagree is, I think what he's asking for is specifics to look at, to generate, let's look at the nonprofit, the use, let's look at these things, and if that's not the case, then I need to understand, because that's what I thought that he was asking for.
Thank you, Mayor. I think in a general sense that is. I mean, I wanted to know exactly what Councilman Duncan said. The issue of whether or not a mill levy increase is something we want to continue to consider. With that sentiment, it tells me what I need to do. I need to look internally, or I need to look for a specific revenue source that we feel would be considered, such as the sales tax. You know, it might be that we're looking at a combination of things. We can say, you know, we look at a small sales tax that helps police and fire specifically, and then we make changes and cuts in other departments in order to be able to make that happen. And so, but knowing that general framework helps us to be able to do that. We will go back as staff and look at what our options are. Some of them may not be pretty when it comes back as to what we have to do in order to reach that target. But when we know that framework, it allows us to do that work. And so that's very helpful.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree as well. I do not think this is the time for any sort of mill levy whatsoever. I think that we have to look internally. For the most part, I agree with Councilman Dobler is that, you know, I think many things should be put on the table, but not making it worse for our frontline workers, et cetera. And, you know, and I would also still agree with Mike the second time around is that, you know, we have to look at the top rather than always looking at the bottom. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So Councilman, City Manager, what it seems like we're hearing is there is not an appetite for an increase in the mill levy, and that there is a desire for looking at different potential revenue streams to include payments in lieu of taxes, fees for services in areas that we had not considered doing fees for services for, and of course, having an overall look at the whole city organization structure so that when we're considering maximizing operations, that it's not just from the bottom, but also from the top level as well. Am I seeing some consensus in what I described that everybody is asking for? Okay, so I think that gives you some direction with regards to the things that are required. My question is for legal at this point in time, being that there was no change in essence to the priorities, is this a resolution that has to be approved, or at this point in time, since the direction was provided that was outside of that, do we need to approve any document or just say that we are, we're just going to follow the steps?
It's in the cover. It's right there. It's third Tuesday in May.
Yeah, it is. We have to do it pursuant to the code.
Okay, so we have to make an approval. Okay, so understanding the parameters that I just described that have been taken down by the clerk of producing a budget that does not include a mill levy increase, making sure that the city manager takes a look at not just the bottom but the top, making sure that we consider payments in lieu of taxes for services that the city is providing currently that is not getting compensated for, and also making sure that there is an efficiency evaluation overall in the community. Is there a motion to approve this course of action? Councilwoman Nager said she moves a motion. Do we have a second? We have Deputy Mayor Emerson second this motion. Additional comments or questions? Councilwoman Ortiz.
That would include any and all positions, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right. So additional comments or questions? If not, we proceed by voting.
Mayor De La Isla,
Yes.
Council Members Hiller,
Yes.
Valdivia Alcala,
Yes.
Ortiz,
Yes.
Emerson,
Yes.
Padilla,
Yes.
Nager,
Yes.
Dobler,
Yes.
Duncan,
Yes.
and Lesser.
Yes.
We have 10 yes.
10 having voting yes, the motion passes. At this point in time, we move into the non-action items of the agenda. If we could have the clerk read action A, item A, non-action item A.
A is discussion of the proposed 2021-2030 capital improvement plan and the 2021-2023 capital improvement budget.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. So on this item, I'm going to read a few things to kind of summarize the areas that we're looking at specifically, and then we can go back and see if there's anything in particular that we want to bring out with any of them. So we emailed, staff did, Jessica did, regarding questions from Supplement 4 that related to a number of different things. That was emailed on April 27th in response to that Supplement number 4 email. So we have not had any other additional feedback related to that supplement. So I'm going to move on to the fact that with general obligation bonds, as we move forward for 2021, we look at continuing with the projects that we proposed in the CIP when it comes to general obligation bonds. If what our plan would be is that in December of 20, we would take a look at how things look and determine if there were any projects that needed to be removed or not considered going forward. With regards to Polk Quincy Viaduct, we would ask to consider the amount of money that is there, but we would also realize that we may not need to take action as it relates to Polk Quincy Viaduct in the immediate year. It's all dependent on how fast KDOT wants to go with regards to that project and how we move forward with right-of-way acquisitions and those types of things with them. So we would continue to keep the same amount with Polk Quincy, but we would manage that based on the project's speed. Revenue bonds, at this point, we would look at moving forward with the same projects that are in the CIP, realizing, of course, that revenues may decrease as we go through 21. It's hard to know where we're going to be as it relates to the amount of revenues. We have, and I'll mention this too, staff has identified what projects they would not do if revenues did not come, and I'll cover that in a minute. That applies both in the way of revenue bonds and also sales tax. So we would ask that we go ahead and continue to approve that in the CIP committee, and we would look at making a decision in late 2020, December, of what projects we would be considering as we go forward in 21. In regards to the city half-cent sales tax, there was a sheet that was provided for both the Fix Our Streets sales tax and also our county-wide half-cent sales tax projects. We would move forward with all of those projects, and we have identified a few that we would wait to bid until later in the month, later in the year. Same goes with the county. We continue to see and track how the funding comes in the county sales tax and would adjust if needed. But at this point, look at going ahead and moving forward with the projects, not knowing where we're going to be. When it relates to federal funds, cash, and other projects, obviously, we do those when the money becomes available. So we would address those. When we look at the specific projects that we would consider in 2020, the projects that we will bid in July and August, in other words, delaying until the revenue picture can be clear, there are 5 projects. The Westview Mill and Overlay, which is $1.65 million. The Bluewood Mill and Overlay, which is just over $1 million. The Watson Saline Mill and Overlay, which is $750,000. The Southeast Deer Creek Parkway Mill and Overlay of $600,000, and then the curb replacement project, which is $500,000, which is basically $4.5 million worth of projects that we will delay bidding until July or August in order to ensure where we think the projections are going with sales tax. Still intend to do those projects sometime during this year, but delaying the project start. With regards to the utility projects, we're looking at in stormwater, there's a drainage correction program. We would look at potentially impacting first actions with regards to the stormwater master plan. In wastewater, it would be the North Topeka Pump Station Rehab Project and the Oakland Backup Generator Project would both be considered first. And then in water, our West Plant Rehab. And there's numbers that go along with these, but basically staff has identified the projects that we would delay or see impacted first if revenues did not happen. So we're prepared in that regard to move the CIP project forward as we've presented, and then make adjustments in December. We'll have a discussion again on what we've seen, what projects would go forward, and make adjustments accordingly.
Questions for City Manager? Councilman Emerson, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, hey, no problem. Yeah, thank you, City Manager, for that. I guess I had a question, particularly on these mill and overlay projects. When I was looking at the document that Ms. Lemon-Bowl provided, didn't have a lot of time. We just got that, as you know, about a half hour before the meeting. But on there, it seemed like she was indicating we have like $10 million in like surplus money in that right now. Is that, I guess, is that correct?
Yeah, I have to pull my sheet out. Wait 1 second. Yes, that is the projected reserves available from 2019 was $12,639,000.
Yeah.
So
I guess my thought is right now, you know, as I talked about on Friday, oil prices are a huge component of asphalt jobs. Right now, we're probably going to get a job done for maybe 33% less than it would have been a year ago. I would not want to delay those projects. As a matter of fact, I might want to accelerate those projects because right now you can get more done for fewer dollars. And I guess I don't understand why those projects, you know, the number one thing that people are always talking to us about is fix the streets, fix the streets, fix the streets, fix the streets. And that's the one thing we're talking about delaying here. And I totally understand staff and I appreciate them looking into options. However, I would not be in favor of delaying those projects because that's the number one thing we've done this tax for.
With regards to that, I think that, you know, we can look at that, but I think, you know, we wanted to be a little bit conservative in this approach. It would be nice, those projects would not be hindered in their ability to get completed within the year. And so that's why we looked at those projects as being projects that we should delay. Now, obviously, that's 5 different projects, and as we get numbers in, it might be that 1 or 2 of them could go ahead and move forward instead of being delayed. And I think that it's such a fluid situation right now. We've identified where we would hold, and obviously we can look at where we can move forward. And so we'll take that into consideration. These projects are going to get done. We don't expect them not to, and we'll analyze that.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that there was a mentioning of the Pope Quincy Viaduct. I don't know if this is the time to discuss it, but I do want to say that project is going to get done anyway by the state. You know, we're looking at what, 20 million in GO bonds. It shows 7 million in 2021, 7 million in 2022, 6 million in 2023. So being a little bit new to this process, when we do those years of the GO bonds, how long before we start making payments on those?
Well, when we sell them, their first payment is usually due 1 year later. So the payments would typically start 1 year after.
Mm-hmm. And do we have any idea what the payment amounts will be?
No, not at this time. We don't know yet specifically which amount will be needed, and that's why I was saying earlier is we would delay expenditure until we knew specifically what was needed. But we do know that the state is expecting us to participate in this project. And so we can, if we take this money off the table, there is the distinct possibility that it gets moved, the project gets moved further down the list.
Right, it gets further down the list, or we get further down the list. Because in my communications, when I had spoken with them, we know it's going to get done one way or another. That 20 million just gets us up higher on the list. And, you know, my thought at this time is, you know, why would we want to be doing that during a time when we have no idea what's ahead of us? And, maybe we will need, to borrow somewhere else for something that is more crucial than this. Businesses will end up being impacted as well. I mean, I need to learn more of the particulars, but I just think it is not a good move to keep that in the CIP. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. The city manager is going to respond, and then Councilman Dobler, we see you.
The biggest thing that I would want to say is right now, from the standpoint of what we've been working with related to the Greater Topeka Partnership, that this is the business community's #1 priority is for the commerce that is happening on that corridor, that we need to pursue this project. And they've been working as a partner with us in order to meet with the DOT and get that moved forward. And so I would definitely want to, as you as a governing body, I think you want to make sure and get that input from that organization as well as we move forward with this.
Councilman Dobler.
Thank you. I understand the concern. I think there's probably a compromise position here, and that is, because it is a bit of a chicken and egg thing, we need to show a commitment to KDOT in order to essentially get the project at some point. And you think about the return on investment, 20 million gets us 250 million or whatever it is. It's something we have to look at. I think the compromise position is that this will require a city-state agreement. So at some point, it's all going to have to be spelled out, what the city participation looks like, what we get in return for that. That agreement, I would posit, should come before the council for approval. So that would, even though we might approve the CIP amount, that wouldn't be our last touch of it. It would come back in the form of that city-state agreement if the city manager is agreeable to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hiller, to be followed by Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, to be followed by Councilman Duncan.
A question for city manager and/or Councilman Dobler. We talked a lot before about that $20 million match. Councilman Dobler had indicated that once that time squeezed a little bit, there'd be a good chance we could get a lot of that in grants, which I was really happy to hear. I've also been involved in some other conversations. I mean, we really do want that done for the redevelopment of the riverfront area and more of the industrial side as well. But we, in the process of doing that, will be giving up a fair amount of prime property tax producing land for the right-of-way. And has there been conversation about whether we should be aware that we'd be doing that, that somehow that some sort of a 20-year accommodation, let's say, for our loss of revenue for giving up that property could be counted as part of our contribution? Just wanted to throw that possibility out.
I have not seen that done in projects like this. We are going to be the small part of the funding for this between federal and state money. There's hundreds of $1 million that's involved, and so I think that's realized when this type of an agreement is created, is that there's contributions large regarding the federal and the state level. We are considering a potential consultant that could help us with writing those grants to the federal level, and we're analyzing that right now, finding the vendor that has expertise in that area and moving forward with that, so that we can get ourselves in line for those kind of grants that we know we need.
I appreciate that. I also know that the state is asking the different cities to identify how they can contribute to the project as goodwill, if you want to call it that, or match money. And given that, and that I've been at those public hearings anyway, appear to be pretty fluid about that. I don't know that anybody else is giving up the kind of tax-producing right-of-way that we would be, and just wanted to throw that out for consideration in the negotiation.
And one thing that we are working on, and Bill Finder is working, and Jason Peak, related to the design of the project, that would reduce the amount of property that we potentially would need to take and make some redesign with regards to the project. And so those things are being explored with the DOT as well.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, to be followed by Councilman Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, all I can say is I have to counter this because I had a brief discussion myself with the Kansas Secretary, Julie Lawrence, with the Department of Transportation, and our dialogue was that this was basically providing an upseas, up the chain. It was going to be done, and you know, if they wanted to buy in, you know, if we wanted to buy in, that was fine, and you know, so there wasn't going to be anything that if we did not put this 20 million forward, where the project would not be done, where they would pose any risk or danger with stalling it being done, because we did not put in this 20 million. And that was the gist of the conversation, along with some other things about tunnels that she was talking about that seemed very odd to me. But so I just need to be clear on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Duncan.
So I will say all this as someone who has been originally skeptical of the necessity of that project, but who's come around a little bit and talking with the business community and looking at its long-term viability and in conversations with the state. But I will say two things that I think are important. I have the opposite impression, I guess, a little bit of Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala, in the sense that while they have said this is on our list and you'll just move down the list, moving down the list is that's a big list, and once those dollars are gone and 5 years goes by, we could have a different secretary, we could have a different legislative body that moves that project. So part of my concern is I don't know that the state is 100% committed to we're doing this no matter what, whenever you're ready, Topeka, or whether that means we push it off to 10 years, 15 years. So I have a concern there. But I also remind, I said this a few months ago, the other thing that the state has been clear about is there is no cheaper buy-in than today. They have been very clear that the percentage today is going up several percent next year, and it's going up several percent the year after that. And so I struggle with spending that money now on this, in the sense that we have this budget problem, but I also know that if we're going to do this, if we are doing this project, there is no cheaper time moving forward to do this from my perspective. And so that's why I feel like a need to stay in there. And it also has a ticking clock, so I don't know when we need to make those decisions, but we probably need to look at it soon.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay. Well.
We talked a lot about Polk Quincy. Are there any other concerns related to the general obligation bond projects, revenue projects that we propose? And remember, this is not the only time that we will talk this. This is coming back next week. My hope, though, is that we could approve it at the next meeting.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you. Having a hard time with my unmute. Okay, so thank you, Mayor. My question would be then, with the 20 million, where would we be put on the list if we don't provide the 20 million? Where does that take us down on the list? Do you have that information, or can you find that out? Or is that private?
I do not have that information. That hasn't been shared with us by the DOT. They've only produced their first 3-year list, and their 3-year list does not have us on that list, but we believe that we could be on the next 3-year list.
If the 20 million is provided.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. So what we heard was reconsideration of the initial topics of road projects, and much more information on Polk Quincy. Councilman Duncan.
So can we, what is our process then for, when do we want to finalize this? What is our, the whole thing in general? Do we have a timeline? Can we walk through how many more times we want to talk about this, when we want to get into some other issues regarding it?
The timeline, basically, what I would like to have is approval at the next meeting. If there are no changes that people want to make within the project list, moving a project up or back or whatever, within the list. It would be good to go ahead and get it approved at the next meeting. And then from there, it absolutely, in my opinion, we need to set an absolute deadline of May 19th, because we have to get started on the operating budget in June in order to have a chance to get it completed by the August requirement. And so we really we need to get started on the operating budget at the beginning of June. And so we need to put this one aside, complete it, move on.
Okay, thank you. Great discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying to decide,
Yes, Councilman.
there's some other, I guess, questions I have, or I know there are other council members who have some concerns with certain projects, so I guess I didn't know if that's where we're at tonight, or waiting till next week, or when do we want to open that Pandora's box as a body?
What I would say is the best way actually is if you could send those to me tomorrow, next day, we can then, as staff, research those questions and issues that you have for concerns on those projects and be able to provide you an answer at the next meeting that then would allow for the partaking of discussion if you're looking at wanting to make a change. Okay. And formally what would happen would be if you want to make a change in a project, you would prepare an amendment to the list that we have and say, I would like to amend this project to be done in this year and then not do this project in this year in order to accomplish what you're pursuing as an amendment. Or if you want to eliminate a project altogether, same kind of deal, an amendment to not do this project at all.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilwoman Heller.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, just to follow up on that, I have had a lot of questions, as you know, and we have a lot of material to review, and then things that people may not have asked about. I didn't prepare anything specific for tonight because I wanted to hear where we were on all these things before I spent any time on it. Sure. So, maybe it sounds like you're open. If people have a variety of suggestions, we may not be able to vote just because everybody will need to process what we have on the table next week. But it sounds like if it's simple and we're ready, fine. Otherwise, we could have a good, robust discussion and then sort of sift it out and vote on the 19th, and we'd be fine.
That will work,
Correct.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we now move on to item B. If the clerk would read.
B is an update on the City of Topeka 2020 operating budget.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a lot of new information. However, you did receive the reports related to the sales tax funds, and I think that's really the most important update that I have is that information. The intent will be that in 2 weeks, again, we will update any new information we have, whether it's revenues or changes that we may make and consider. Staff is meeting to discuss the union's proposals of alternatives on May 13th. We'll have a discussion with them at that point, and then just to make sure we understand what their proposals are and where some of them that we may have already incorporated, inform them of that so that we'll have that discussion and then move forward from there.
All right. Seeing no further questions, thank you for the report. At this point in time, we move on to the announcements.
The May 12th preliminary agenda, we just have the discussion on the CIP.
City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, the first thing I want to do is wish a happy birthday to my wife. It is today, and we celebrated last night knowing that I would be here, but anyway, happy birthday to her. Second item I have is that Todd Harrison has been appointed as the next fire marshal for the Topeka Fire Department, so if you happen to see Todd, congratulate him on that new appointment. I'm happy to announce the city has received a Special Achievement in GIS Award from ESRI, ESRI, very top award for their organization, and so we're super excited about what that department, the TSG, Technical Solutions Group, has done with regards to that in recognition. With the way things are, I don't know that there's actually going to be like a go and visit, yeah, but The next thing I would ask, or just report, is that we did have a lot of storm cleanup to do with the last storm that went through on Monday. We had several traffic signals that had issues. Staff believes that they will have everything back up and operational related to those traffic signals on Wednesday. Forestry crews had all of the roads open by 6:30 last night, which is amazing given how many trees were down. And they should have all the branches that have been piled up that they've had to work on and have everything cleaned up hopefully by the end of the week. So amazing job on their part, given how bad that windstorm was. So that's all I have, Mayor.
All right, thank you so much. Very quickly, I know that everybody was watching as the county announced their plan for the reopening that followed closely the governor's plan. Really appreciated all the information that we received. I think that for the most part, I am very proud of the team that has been put together that includes all of the business community and has been talking through how we're going to take a look at this. I do want to let the community know what you probably already do know is if you take a look at the numbers of cases, we have been following this very closely. There's been some increases. So just make sure that you're safe when you're out there. Before I got to the meeting, I got a message from Incident Commander Nichols wanting to make sure that he passed on his appreciation to all of you. We have the privilege of working this week with Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala on several issues today, and the team has nothing but great things to say about this council. So wanted to pass on that appreciation and just to remind your city that you have a great group of people working for you. And I consider it a privilege to be working under, which is interesting, having the mayor working under the county as a liaison, because it shows how cool our community is. It shows the fact that we're not really concerned about turf, we're concerned about people. So thank you all for doing what you're doing. Please stay safe. Councilwoman Nager.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to echo what you said, that we are all working on this, on acts to make sure that the community is recovering in a healthy and robust way in every sense of those words. But it really comes down to people taking care of themselves and knowing their limits, financially, health-wise. And so I just encourage everyone to be safe and to support those around you as you can. Thank you.
Councilman Dobler.
Thanks, Mayor. I have no comments.
Councilman Duncan.
No, I have nothing. I'm good. Thank you.
Councilman Lesser.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. After the walk-in last week with Tony and the parking experience of Councilman Dobler, I was glad to see that he zoomed in this evening rather than parallel park, especially with the protesters out there. I was afraid somebody could have got hurt. But in all honesty, I want to send my condolences to the Overland Park Police Department, as well as several of, many of our officers actually knew the gentleman as he was president of the FOP up there as well. So our police officers deal with COVID now, but they deal with life and death situations every day on top of that. So my condolences to the police officers and their families.
Councilwoman Heller.
Follow everybody else. I appreciate so much all the leadership, but also all the citizens, as well as all the citizens trying to get through this time. It's exciting, but a little scary to have the businesses start to open up again and have to remember our masks and our distancing and so on. But our community, and thank you, Mayor, for your leadership in it. Our community has done as well as any could, I think, and so we'll just keep going.
Councilwoman Valdivia Alcala.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say the storm yesterday was really brutal to parts of the district. I know other parts of the city, especially here in Oakland, huge trees basically destroyed 2 homes. I want to thank City Manager for, after his hard day of work, coming out there, I don't know, it's probably close to sunset, and visiting the people there that were looking at houses they couldn't get into because the trees were so large that were on them. And just tell Oakland people that, you know, everything's moving as fast as possible to get trees removed and get back on track. Also, really happy to know that some businesses, small businesses in District 2 have been able to utilize monies and gift cards from the HOST program. And we're still pushing that as well. And that I did have also the pleasure of working a little bit more up close and personal with Shawnee County Emergency Management today, and the communication was fluid, it was transparent, and it was timely. And in a time like this, that's very, that's very hard to find, but it was definitely there. So, and thank you, Mayor, for helping. That's it.
Councilwoman Ortiz.
Comments?
All right. Being that there is no further comment, there is no further. Oh, Councilman Padilla. Place right now.
Jeez.
Forgive me, Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor.
Deputy Mayor. Oh my gosh.
That's okay.
Wow.
Nothing tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Padilla, please wrap us up.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of things. To follow on the heels of happy birthday wishes to your wife, I'd like to wish a belated happy birthday by one day to the newest member of the Padilla clan, my niece Angela, and her husband Eric, Mr. and Mrs. Slatton. She gave birth to Crew Ray Slatton, so he's a new member of the Padilla clan, and both mother and son are doing well, so I congratulate her and him, and happy birthday to Crew. And also to wish condolences to the officers of the Overland Park Police Department and their families in this time of loss. And to remind everybody, I'm sure you know it, this weekend's Happy Mother's Day, so everybody spend some time with your mom, living or passed away. Keep them in your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy Mother's Day to all the ladies. And with that, this meeting is adjourned.
Good evening.